structure, the incumbent structure of teachers are going to have a difficult time in terms of making adjustments. If you have a certain amount of emotional and professional investment in the system as it is, and you know that change will take away some of that, remove the gate, if you will.
Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of the EdTech Spot's STEM in Education series. My name is Jelani Payne, and I'm a STEM and CTE educator and advocate, as well as a multidisciplined engineer.
And my name is Jonathan Richards, and I am an ICT professional and one of the co-founders of the EdTech Spot. And today, we will be speaking with a special guest about his journey to clean, affordable energy.
That's right. Now, before we get this show rolling, I want you to let us know where you're from in the live chat or the comment section. Feel free to leave your name, your country, and your social media handle as well. Feel free to give yourself a shout out.
Yep, and our special guest today is Mr. Carlton Cummins, the co-founder and chief technical officer of Aceleron, a battery technology company in the United Kingdom. Just
to give you a brief background, Carlton began his renewable energy career working in the solar energy space, coordinating over 100 photovoltaic installations in the Caribbean before moving to the UK to pursue a master's in business and sustainability at Brunel University. Carlton is very passionate about electric and fuel cell vehicles.
And he's also accustomed to sharing his insights with other media outlets like the BBC Breakfast Live, Energy Storage News, and Autodesk Trade magazine as well.
And to add to this, he's also one of the top 10 entrepreneurs of Barbados, having been named explicitly by our Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Motley, in her state address in 2019. In addition, Carlton was named the Shell Livewire UK Young Entrepreneur of the Year and is featured on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list in 2017.
So, here to give perspective on careers, entrepreneurship, and education in the area of renewable energy is our guest, as promised, Mr. Carlton Cummins, right after this.
Carlton, welcome to the EdTech Spot.
Hi.
How are you doing, Carlton?
Yeah, this was my puzzled expression just to check that you were hearing me right, but I guess you are. Today is all right. It's a pretty casual Sunday here. Relatively cold, but I won't complain.
Relatively cold, huh? As compared to Barbados, nice and sunny all year round.
Yeah, I think today's about 10 degrees.
Wow. I have friends all over the world. That's usually the thing that gets you. It's sunny, yet it's cold as ice. It's crazy. So Carlton, allow me to provide some added perspective for our viewers about some of your accomplishments, specifically regards to being a Shell Young Entrepreneur of the Year and also being on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. If you would permit me, just for 1 or 2 minutes. Now, Shell Livewire is actually a Royal Dutch Shell social investment program. And what it does is it supports young entrepreneurs in the UK, basically. And startup grants are offered to one company a month, only one, as well as mentorship and online business support to an age range of 16 to 30-year-old entrepreneurs who have innovative businesses addressing sustainable living challenges. Now, to compete in the annual competition, the Shell Livewire UK Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award, that is a mouthful, I know. Entrepreneurs must first win one of those previous grants that I mentioned, which provides about approximately £5,000. Now, for those of you who don't know, that's approximately 7,000 US dollars. Now, monthly winners of those grants can then take part in the annual competition, and they're then able to win an additional £25,000, which is approximately 35,000 US dollars, and that is equity-free funded. Carlton can probably explain what that means, but both he and I know that that is great because then, no one has to take a slice of the pie, or in this case, the company, right, Carlton?
Yeah, it's basically free money. At a slight cost as to how comfortable you are presenting and how articulate you are when it comes to kind of providing people with a little bit of essence as to what you're trying to achieve and why. So it is true. We did participate in the Shell Live Wire. This was back in 2017. It is an international competition. We were participating on the UK arm of the international competition, so that kind of whittles it down to competing against other companies in the UK. There tends to be stiff competition. Fun fact, I didn't win the monthly prize the first month we applied, but Shell actually did a really excellent job providing feedback. I generally like to tell people that feedback is often better than winning. It sounds really strange, but if you can learn a little bit about what people think about you and get a little bit of insight as to why they think that way, it tends to go a lot longer, be a lot more valuable in the long term. So I think the feedback throughout the whole process was actually more valuable than the awards and accolades. And that's not to show less appreciation for the accolades. It's just that you learn a lot more generally from feedback than you would sometimes just from getting the money.
Two things come to mind, Carlton. Thing number one is that sometimes it's so important to explain these accolades. First of all, not everyone knows what they are, of course, but then also too, it's so important that sometimes you help people understand that, yeah, really and truly the failure, which really and truly provides the feedback, right? Because it's only through failure that you really get that feedback. I remember Mark Cuban saying something. He said, "You don't really learn anything from success. It works. That's it. You don't really learn anything from it." And that was interesting to me. But to move on here, 2017 was a pretty big year for you. That's thing number two. 2017 was a huge year. So even though you might have failed the first time around with the Shell Live Wire, you came back again. You got one of those grants, and then you end up being a winner there. And then you moved on to the Forbes 30 under 30 list. 2017 was a huge year. For those who don't know, the Forbes 30 under 30 lists, that's plural, are the go-to guide for those persons and companies on the precipice of changing the world. The most important part in developing these lists are the tens of thousands, not tens, not thousands, not hundreds, tens of thousands of nominations, which are only the starting point. Persons can nominate themselves or others, and nominations are whittled down to a short list and given to an A-list panel of judges for the final 30 selection. That's some serious competition. Steph doesn't even begin to describe it, Carlton.
So there's an interesting story about the Forbes 30 on the 30 list.
Of course.
So we weren't really on the radar for the first 30 on the 30 list in terms of us being aware of it at the time. But what happened was that part of our strategy in the early days of Aceleron was to build momentum and traction in the market by entering lots of competitions. We weren't always entering the competition to win, but just to get the experience of communicating to an audience what we do and why. And over time, we were able to kind of refine the narrative. I think we would have entered in 2017 about 35 different competitions throughout the year. We only actually won about 5 of them, but the 5 are the successes are the thing that people always hear about. They don't always hear about like the other stuff. And what I learned was there was a scout for Forbes at one of the events. We did not win this event, but they heard when we were talking about the business, and the way we articulated what we were doing really aligned or really spoke to them. And it was just from that chance interaction, that ability to articulate ourselves very well at that opportune time, that we were able to get onto the list and kind of take advantage of that. So the one thing I would have said that I learned from the Forbes competition is always put yourself in a position where you're ready to present. Always be ready to represent yourself, but get comfortable with learning how to refine and optimize how you articulate yourself. Like, there's always a better way to say something, but you only learn that from like saying it to different people at different times in different environments. So you really have to put yourself out there. You can't read how to do that and execute it. There's a really interesting thing I learned about. There's a difference between confidence and competence. When you read about something, you develop the confidence to do it, but because you haven't done it, you don't have the muscle memory or some of the soft skills to have the competence to demonstrate it. So that's where like the doing it has to happen.
We've actually kind of sped forward here. So, Carlton, for the benefit of our viewers, those persons watching who are unfamiliar with two things, battery technology and the company Aceleron, I want you to briefly describe for us what Aceleron does, as well as your role as Aceleron's Chief Technical Officer.
Yeah, sure. So fundamentally, at Aceleron, we make batteries. What we've done that makes us a little bit unique is that within the energy storage space, very much like many other industries, there are many subsections. There are many different unique characteristics. It's like smartphones, all of them are the same but different. And in the industry, we wanted to develop a battery that was designed to be more sustainable. And for us, sustainability meant that it was designed to be repaired, repurposed, upgraded, as opposed to a battery that's used and then it's disposed when it reaches its end of life. Now, in that battery space, we don't exist in the consumer electronics. So we don't make batteries for your cell phone or your laptop. We make batteries to power your house. We make batteries to power, businesses and companies. We make batteries to basically allow you to store renewable energy and then utilize it at more useful times. Because one thing most people aren't always aware of about renewable energy is that it is intermittent. The sun doesn't stick around at night. The wind doesn't always blow when you want it to. So the value of a battery is that it serves as an energy bucket. It allows you to capture that energy when it is available and use it when you actually want to use the energy. So we wanted to make batteries for that industry to help people transition toward renewables a lot more quickly, that were designed to be repaired, recycled, repurposed a lot better than the batteries made today, which are treated more like one-off products. You buy it, you use it, it lasts X amount of years, and then somebody else needs to deal with it because it's their problem.
It's true. I've worked in that space for about half a decade, and energy is very, very intermittent. It's not constant. Even the sun, and we spoke about this in dry run sessions, Carlton, where the sun moves across the sky. It's not always the same height. It doesn't. Again, it can be sunny one day. Yeah, it can be rainy one day. You can have different amounts of cloud cover. There's so much that goes on. Okay, so moving further on, Carlton, I have to admit, one of my personal focal areas is to help students make great strategic decisions for their lives. After all, in education, this is something that I truly believe in. And this includes choosing career paths, which is one of the main reasons that we're speaking to you today. And notice I said paths plural. This is because I believe in any given lifetime, in a person's lifetime, they can have multiple career paths and not just be attracted to one source of professional happiness. All right. So, Carlton, I'd like you to outline for us your career path, your journey from secondary school or high school education to present date, becoming the co-founder and CTO of battery technology company Aceleron.
Yeah, definitely, and I'll definitely touch on the whole like what a CTO is as well. But I started in the Caribbean, in Barbados, secondary school, as you do. I always liked making things. That was always a key driver for me. And even though I wasn't sure in secondary school what I wanted to be when I grew up, like I don't know many people that say want to be a CTO of a battery company when they're in secondary school. That's just not a thing. it actually will touch on a point we'll probably discuss later on, which is kind of like
How many
preparing for
people
the
even know
future.
what a CTO is?
Yeah. But I always knew that I like making stuff, and I tried to align myself with activities that allowed me to make. You know, you and your parents do this as well, where they know what you tend to like doing, and my parents have always encouraged me in the things that I like doing. So he liked to make things, so let me buy you a book about making things. That's how they would see it, and they would encourage me, you know, to draw and to to dabble with a lot of little electronics. So they'd buy me a lot of little home DIY books for electronics, how to make a small light bulb circuit, how to make a motor with a few magnets and a nail, that kind of stuff. And I've always been intrigued by that. And that that small encouragement has kind of egged me on into making decisions. Like I did electronics, I did technical drawing, I did physics, I did chemistry. I had a predisposition for those types of subjects because they really aligned with my idea or my fascination with making things and how things worked. So by the time I reached university level, when I understood what mechanical engineering was about, you know, the discipline of transitioning energy from one form to another. We are not in we are not car mechanics, often confused. A mechanical engineer is trained in the trade of transforming energy from one form to another. A car engine is one of the devices that does that. But you know, a renewable energy system, it functions along the same principles. So that's why mechanical engineering, I like to refer to us probably as like the Swiss Army knives of the engineering discipline, because energy exists in many disciplines, and the process of transforming energy from one form or another is useful in many disciplines. Mechanical engineers fit very comfortably in a lot of spaces, and a lot of making of things was involved in mechanical engineering. So I heard that, and that was enough for me to be comfortable and confident that that was something I wanted to do. So I went from secondary school to University of the West Indies. It was the most accessible engineering school at the time. That's just a nice bit of saying it was cheap enough that my parents could afford it. Not ashamed about that either. You work with what you have. I think that's one of the things that was really important that I learned is really important. Some people, if they don't get, you know, if they don't get the opportunity that they wanted, they feel suppressed and they lose momentum. But you often have to learn to work with the cards that you're dealt. I applied for like 4 schools in the US. I got into 3 of them. I also got the bill for what they costed, and then for what it yeah, and then I made a quick decision that University of West Indies was for me. And I don't feel ashamed about that. I just had to work with the cards that I was dealt. I wasn't going to get upset with my parents because they couldn't afford, you know, to send me to school in the US. That doesn't mean that I couldn't, you know, reap the benefits of the degree. I just had to work with the cards that I was dealt. So I did that, went to work in renewables because one thing that was really exciting me at the time was just the renewable energy trends when I left the university. Solar panels were cheap enough that people in the Caribbean were starting to buy them. So I saw that as being a new, exciting opportunity. And from working renewables is where I learned that there was a need for energy storage, basically energy buckets to help us to use this energy at different times. And that's where it kind of segued into probably the thinking of a CTO. A CTO in a business fundamentally is a chief technical officer. And my job often is making the decisions for the company when it comes to the strategy that we choose for the technology that we're building. In a simple sense, we make battery technology. Where do we want to sell that battery technology? What does that product need to look like? Who are those customers? What do those customers need? And then when you wrap that all together, what does that product then look like? So my job as a CTO is to kind of take those nuggets, what the market looks like, what the technology can do today, what the company is capable of doing, and then transform that into a product that the chief commercial officer or the sales team can sell. It, in ideal terms, that's often how it is. It isn't always that elegant. Sometimes the need comes to you. Sometimes the customers come to you. Sometimes you get kind of pulled in a certain direction. Sometimes you really need to get off your butt and respond to, you know, an opportunity that comes to you as opposed to you doing this crystal balling and the opportunity you find. So it can work back and forth, but a large part of my role is about identifying what strategy is best for our technology based on what the market wants and what we're able to do.
I'm inclined to to state the following. I remember I heard this listening to a luxury channel, where they showcase lots of high-end cars and so on. And the host of the show said the only difference between men and boys is the cost and size of their toys. I mentioned that because I know a lot of young men and women too are going to be very excited to become CTOs in the future. Oh, so that's what that job is called. And this is why we're doing that. This is why we're having the show for our viewers, because we want you to understand what these various areas are called so that you can actually go and look it up for yourself. The students and the youth can go and look it up. Educators can go and look it up. Policymakers can research it and can begin to design policies which align with those particular trends. And I also mentioned that so that people get excited by the fact that Carlton gets to play with some pretty expensive toys. We're talking 3D printers, yeah? We're talking robotic type equipment, yeah? It's not just some of the more simple things that are simple tools that you might see that are used by hand. On that note, here at the EdTech Spot, it's important that our viewers, whom are educators, policymakers, and adults generally interested in education, help students understand that while they may have goals, while they may have plans of success, the path is not a straight line. And it requires some failure. Yes, I said it. It requires some failure, perseverance. Notice what Carlton said. In order for you to actually become competent, you have to try, yeah, and you will not always succeed. And it's really that failure that you learn from. So it requires some failure, perseverance, and willingness to achieve goals and reach success. And sometimes in the end, the path that we might have had planned can change, but it's still just as successful, or even more so. It can be an even better career and life path. But that's a lot of long talk, as we would say here in Barbados and the Caribbean. Carlton, based on that, based on the career path you just outlined for us, did you focus consistently on renewable energy the entire time? Or are you currently off the beaten path from where you initially thought you wanted your career to go?
So I would say that things have adjusted and changed over time. Originally, we had a very different vision for the business, and that has changed based on trends in the market. I think it's always important when you're a company to realize that you are part of a larger ecosystem. So you're part of the world as opposed to the world waiting for you to come up with some new solution. So you need to make sure that what you are developing is what the world needs, and they can see the relevance of it. Because the difference between needing something and being able to appreciate its relevance. If your timing is off and you present something that people don't see as relevant, you can also cease to exist for that reason. There are lists of many companies who cease to exist simply because they were too soon with their idea. So sometimes you have to adapt just because the market isn't ready for what you want. Sometimes you have to concede that what you originally wanted to do is not as relevant as you may have thought it would have been. It was a bit too niche, is the term you will hear very often. Or sometimes, interestingly, you may realize your strength is in somewhere else. Originally, when I first came about, I was looking to do electric bicycles because I like electric bicycles. And I remember I went to a competition, and the guy was like, look, the electric bicycle market is going to be saturated very quickly by very well-known brands, and you're going to struggle if you go in that direction. He didn't say that I can't do it. He just said, like, here are the facts, and this is what's likely to happen. But he did say that the idea you have for the battery on that bicycle is quite interesting. And what I would advise you is to definitely put a little more thought into that, because that might have a bit more opportunity in it than the bicycle and the battery. So I basically dropped the bicycle. Well, what I did before that was that I kind of assessed what he said, aligned it with what I was trying to achieve. I was trying to make a business that would have some sort of impact. So based on that vision for myself, I wasn't uncomfortable with dropping the bike, because in dropping the bike and focusing on the battery, I still achieved what I was trying to achieve, which is a big thing when it comes to feedback. A good way to deal with feedback is to have a sense of what you're trying to achieve. If you have a good vision for where you're trying to go, not necessarily in great detail, but you generally have an idea as to what you're trying to achieve, it gives you a lot more ability to deal with feedback and critique. You hear it for what it is useful for, and you can very quickly navigate what is not useful as well. So his feedback about the battery having more legs than the bike because of the market situation makes sense. Me focusing on the battery makes sense. So I just quickly made an adjustment based on that, and it worked out a little better for me.
So far we have that basically it's a numbers game. Notice that Carlton earlier mentioned, pitch in several times, over 30 times. Okay, so it's a numbers game plus a perseverance game, and you also have to be willing to change. You also have to be willing to move with the tide. In other words, you ensure that you're not stuck on something because you like it, rather than it being right for the market and right for you, in fact. Carlton, in many ways, as Aceleron's CTO, you yourself are an educator, and we've discussed this previously. Now, we acknowledge that you're not a typical school or academic type educator, which is a good thing, because we need entrepreneurs creating jobs and providing professional niche training. And we promise, therefore, we promise we won't judge you too harshly on your answer to this question. Instead, what we're looking for here is we want you to be free with your insight, having gone through various education systems, both in the Caribbean and internationally in the United Kingdom. So first up, what insights can you share regards to Barbados and the wider Caribbean on trends in employment and business? When I say business, I mean entrepreneurship, to prepare students to make good strategic decisions regards to career paths in renewable energy.
So one thing that I can guarantee, or I can say with high confidence, is that the career market changes all the time. It's a moving target, but jobs that are relevant today will have a different relevance in 10 years time. So I appreciate that educators have a big challenge when it comes to creating a curriculum to create professionals of the future, when it's difficult to tell what the future looks like. But one thing that tends to be consistent is that companies, organizations, institutions value people who have the ability to think creatively and problem solve, and that transcends all types of industries. Because I think the one thing that's consistent in all businesses is that we got problems that need fixing. So training people on how to think, I think, often is more valuable than training them on what to think, because what you teach them to think can change in some circumstances. What is objectively true, it will always stay true, but what is relevant to the market can change. So training people how to think, I think, is often more relevant. In encouraging curiosity, I think, is another area that's really important, where a large part of training people on how to think comes down to getting them interested in asking questions, getting them interested in what the answer could be, as opposed to telling them what the answer is. Getting them engaged as well, so that they're really willing to get stuck in there and pursue the answer for themselves. Because sometimes you, as an educator, unfortunately, you may not have the answer for them at that point in time. But if you can encourage them or provoke that interest and curiosity, I think that in itself is extremely valuable when it comes to developing the workforce of tomorrow. If you have people who have a desire to learn a situation, to learn their market, to learn what the business works like and how it functions, and then to kind of fill some of the blanks in, because once you have that desire to think and learn, it puts you in a really good position when it comes to identifying opportunities, flaws, or things that really need addressing. And if you have that curiosity of thinking, you can bring to the table some really unique approaches that other people may not have thought of. It is a little different to teaching people individualism and independent thinking, because the business is a collective. But even the collective does appreciate some of that unique approach to life. And then another thing that's really useful for education is learning or training that skill set when it comes to collaboration. I was listening to a documentary. Was it a documentary? Man, it was let me call it a podcast. But the important thing about it was this was a brilliant guy speaking. And he said that one thing his father taught him, because he's a astrophysicist, his father taught him, it's not just enough to be right in this world. You also need to be effective. What he was trying to tell him there is that when you work in an environment, it's not just, you're not going to succeed just by having the right answer. You need to have the skills to articulate it to people. You need to have the ability to build interest and momentum in your thinking. You need to be able to negotiate, because not everybody's going to be on side with you. But if you have that viewpoint that, man, I write soul, what's the problem? That's not going to get you as far as you could get, because you are part of a collective. So you need to know how to navigate, negotiate, and maneuver through a collective to be able to succeed.
One of my favorite entrepreneurs of all time is Mr. Vusi Tembakwayo. He's a South African entrepreneur. And he did an interview with Tom Billier of Impact Theory. I've listened to it several times. I have no idea how many times I've listened to this. And Vusi he said, you either get the emotion or the progress, but you can't have both. Pause. That was something that I had to literally pause that interview, walk away, meditate on it, and come back and listen to the rest of the show. And in effect, that's what you're really saying. In order to work in a group, it's not about it's not all about what you know all the time, but sometimes it's really about giving other people a voice, giving other people a chance. And honestly, the fact that you are a leader, a co-founder, is really coming out. The fact that you are an educator of the skills in renewable energy as it relates to, Aceleron and your team is actually coming out in what you just said. What insights can you share regards to Barbados and the wider Caribbean on trends in renewable energy during this pandemic and beyond? Now, 1 second. I'll give you an example here, right? And you can run with this as you're answering the question. For example, do you think it's a good idea? This is coming from me. I'm asking this, this is just my example. Do you think it's a good idea for all homeowners or landlords to purchase a renewable energy system, whether it's solar PV or whatever, along with Aceleron's battery storage? Shameless plug for you right there, shameless advertisement. But just because given we currently have many persons working from home, again, watch that trend, watch the numbers. If the likelihood of this continuing, even past the pandemic, do you think that makes sense, right? Is that a trend within the renewable energy space during this pandemic and beyond?
Yeah, so in general, I would never tell people what they should and shouldn't do with their hard-earned money. I can tell you what is going on, and I can tell you some factors to consider with what you might want to do with your money. So in the Caribbean, we have a unique scenario where we have a high cost of energy, but we also have an abundance of sunshine. We are a developing region, and statistically, it is true that one of the prime drivers for growth and development of a society is access to energy, particularly access to cheap energy. So currently we import fossil fuel. It comes from very far away, and that causes it to come to us at a premium. but we do have access to renewable energy in an abundance. So strategically, renewable energy presents an opportunity for us as opposed to it being a frustration or a problem, where we can actually leverage that as a mechanism to leapfrog the energy challenge that the Caribbean currently has. And we have been doing that, I would say, in many countries. But the challenge that we are going to encounter very soon is the fact that renewable energy, unlike a generator, which runs on fossil fuel, is intermittent. The sun just doesn't stick around all of the time. And the wind, well, we know how the wind tends to behave. It's very hard to predict when it's going to do what it's going to do. So what energy storage is allowing us to do is to integrate renewable energy in a far more comfortable fashion. It allows us to really leverage and double down on that renewable energy in a way that is valuable not just for the homeowner, but on the societal level is extremely powerful. That is the difference between developing and developed often has a lot to do with where your energy comes from. It is not the only factor, but it is a significant factor. And then you got like some larger aspects to it. You got energy resilience, climate resilience. And when I say climate resilience, we currently have a challenge where we live in an area that has hurricanes. We know it to be true that the hurricanes are a little more aggressive than they used to be, and they're coming a lot faster and more furious than they used to in the past. Whether or not you believe in climate change, we know those factors to be true. That suggests that we would really want to consider mechanisms to make ourselves a lot more protected from the things that hurricanes tend to do: knock down power lines, break up, the way we distribute energy today. What energy storage and solar panels allow you to do is actually to decentralize the way you distribute your energy. You can have clusters of energy as opposed to one central source that when a monkey climb up on the pole, people in Barbados would understand this, you got power gone for days. Like, that's insanity. But that's simply because we have a centralized model for the distribution of energy. When you have renewable energy in a battery, you've given yourself independence from that mechanism where you have that peace of mind. I have something backed up for a rainy day. And I can tell you that it's a lot cheaper to replace a solar panel on the roof if it get blown away than to put backup poles in St. Philip or St. Thomas. So, because that's often the question, well, what can happen when the solar panels get blown away? Well, solar panels are actually the cheapest component of the system. It's pretty easy to replace it. And if you don't got a roof, you could rest them on the ground and it will still work.
Yeah, I mean, the only difference it would really make is probably just the angle of tilt in terms of the amount of energy you capture, but then not really, unless something is shading it.
Yeah, then you're nitpicking on efficiency. Like, you're talking about 15% less performance or waiting for weeks until they put the power lines back up in your area. Like, and the advantage of the battery there is that without the energy storage, you can only access that energy when it is being produced. That's not necessarily how you live your life today. You live your life today as and when. So energy storage gives you that full independence that you don't need to schedule when you do stuff. You know the battery is there for you. It becomes even more exciting when you look at some of the future trends where a lot of countries in the world, the utility companies are actually paying people for access to their battery at certain times because it is cheaper for them to pay you to use your battery at a certain time than for them to have to invest in a generator to provide that resilience and redundancy. So it's a really exciting future that's going to be coming around in the future, where the renewable energy is going to open a very different relationship between the homeowner and the energy provider. It's not going to be a one-way street. It will actually be bidirectional. You have something of value to them, and they have something of value to you.
And I think people need to recognize that and look at it that way, rather than just look at it as, they just want something and, they're trying to shut out the utility. No, that's not it. We're trying to work together. It can be a very symbiotic relationship. Wow, there's so much knowledge you just dropped there. I really hope our viewers are listening. I really hope educators and policymakers are taking notes, respectfully taking notes, so that you can really focus on what you're going to tell students and how you're going to break this, or rather, I should say, share this information for policymakers. More so focused on legislation, how you're going to implement legislation that will actually help persons, buying these panels, whether they put them on top of their roof or on the ground, whether it's a roof mount system or a ground mount system, and so on. At this point, Carlton, we've already asked you a lot so far. What we're going to do is we're going to take a short break here, a short break, emphasis on short, and return to speak with Mr. Carlton Cummins about his inspiration from the formal education system to then choosing a career in renewable energy, and what educational institutions and policymakers can do respectively to inspire youth, to inspire entrepreneurs to choose a career in renewable energy. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Jonathan Richards, and our guest, Mr. Carlton Cummins, who is the co-founder and chief technical officer of Aceleron, a battery technology company. Carlton is an entrepreneur and design engineer creating solutions relevant to the challenges faced by society. Welcome back, Carlton.
Hi.
Now, Carlton, it seems like I made a little mistake just before the break, which you have not been making at all. You keep unmuting your mic while I'm so enthralled listening to you. I'm muting my mic and I'm there like, yeah.
That's great. At least you won't fall under the curse of 2020 or the saying, your mic is mute.
The mic is muted.
Famous quote. So that is great. That's great. So, Carlton, I'm very curious about your business model in regards to Aceleron, especially regarding your presence in the Caribbean, UK, and East Africa, and also for the concept of the circular economy, as you called it, your vision regarding the Caribbean region. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. So, just as I told Jelani, we have a really big interest in providing a unique element when it comes to energy storage by providing a battery that's more sustainable. And for us, sustainable means it's designed to be repaired, repurposed, upgraded, recycled a lot more easily. So one of the things with our business model is that we first started by redesigning how batteries are made to make it easier to assemble them, easier to disassemble them for upgrade, repair, and recycling. The next thing with our business model is that we localize the support. So instead of us, an Aceleron member or some Aceleron person coming to Barbados or going to Kenya to do any repair, upgrade, or any of that activity, we work with local partners to allow that to happen. So we work with local renewable energy installers and distributors to be able to maintain your products. And we call that a global local model. So we work with a global supply chain to make the product in the first place, but we localize the support. And there's precedence for this methodology in a lot of other businesses. If you think about the automotive industry, you don't call Suzuki if your car breaks down. Like there's a dealer that has the ability to do that, or there's at least a mechanic who has the expertise and the access to the parts. It just wouldn't work to be sustainable if every time something went wrong, you needed like a Suzuki person to fly from Japan and like fix your car. That just wouldn't make any sense. So we applied the same ethos even to energy storage. The reason why we did that is because we're dealing with some very large batteries. A battery that plugs into your house is a significant thing. So you can't really have that sent back or like you put it in the post. That needs to be managed on site. So we done a lot of work to localize the support, and we call that a bit of a circular model. So the idea there is that the product design is produced, used and it can be reused. So that is considered a circular model, whereas a linear model, which is how most of our products are made, is produced, is used, and then it's disposed. Because we've redesigned the product that you can actually maintain it, you can actually upgrade it, you can extend the lifespan of it. It reduces the waste because it's not going to the landfill every time it needs something doing to it. So it's considered circular. It kind of swings around and it continues to add value just by giving a little bit of maintenance.
Yes, and you're modeling this basically on how we should actually engage in sustainability for different types of economies within Barbados, like the blue economy. And I'm glad you emphasized on sustainability being a focal point for your battery. And some of our viewers who may not understand what we're talking about in regards to sustainability is really in an effort to mitigate or avoid depletion of resources in order to maintain an economy or ecological balance, and balance that we hope to sustain in environments like the blue economy. And as you know, Carlton, and I alluded to, the Caribbean region is dependent on service-driven industries like tourism, and we are very volatile to climate change or natural disasters. So where do you see Aceleron as a part of a solution in the blue economy in this regards?
Sure. No, before I say that, I like to give people a really good definition for sustainability that I think resonates with me quite well, because sustainability is quite an important thing, but a lot of people articulate it very differently. The best definition I've heard is going about things in a way that allows you as a society to meet your needs without impacting or impeding the generations going forward to meet theirs. That's what's called sustainable. If you do things in a way that you can meet your needs today without impeding the needs of your children and their generation in the future, you're doing things in a sustainable manner. And we like the way we live in general, we live like that, but we set up businesses in a slightly different way because we follow this whole thing about infinite growth and consistent development, which is somewhat a bit tricky. But bringing it back to the blue economy, when it comes to marine life and the ecosystems around that, it's very important for the Caribbean. We literally are islands. And I think what Aceleron functions well in that space would be as a catalyst for innovation. But I don't think that we would be the solution, the person to provide all of the solutions. When I say a catalyst, I can give an example of one of the projects we're doing in Kenya, where their fishing industry currently, they use boats that run on petrol, gasoline, and that creates some problems when it comes to the ecosystem, because the emissions, just as they're not good for us, they're also not good for the stuff that we eat. So we're working on a project there where we're providing batteries to power the boats that actually are going to run some of the fishing boats in that country. These batteries are made in Kenya by local people that we've trained, a local team that we trained to make the batteries from Kenya. And we've also trained them to maintain the batteries in Kenya. So it's not a one-off project per se. They would be able to manage this and continue to do this, if they choose to do so. And even though it doesn't change everything about the blue economy, transitioning how we do fishing to something that runs on renewables, it sends a message that these things can be done. Things can be done differently. And I know there are lots of people with really exciting ideas of things that could be done differently for the blue economy. But sometimes people need to see that different is possible before they feel comfortable with proposing it. So we're happy to act as a catalyst in that sense. Use some of our expertise and some of the things that we've done in some other markets to show that, hey, different is possible. But I'm very excited to see not what comes from us, but what will actually come from people in the Caribbean when it comes to the blue economy.
Carlton, I I find that interesting because only recently, again, I think I was listening to another entrepreneur saying something similar, saying that basically a brand takes on a life of its own to the extent that it outlives the founders, that it outlives the persons who initially would have invested in that company, whether via skill, effort, money, capital, whatever. And to that extent, it then becomes really interesting what you just said, because I can now link it to something else. And I think our viewers are going to find this interesting. I'll preface it with this. There are places in Africa that, because of lack of access to currency, their currency is actually only transacted on cellular phones. And I kind of wonder how in Barbados and the Caribbean we would do if we could not see our currency, if we couldn't see, well, not even our money, if we couldn't see our currency. And I guess, for the benefit of our viewers, currency being that physical paper, money being, ones and zeros, more or less. That's what it is, right? So to that point, I know that there's a particular project that your company has been working on. I want you to share a little bit with us on it. It's a project where Aceleron has actually teamed up with another company, and you can tell us about them as well, to provide solar-powered computers to over 10,000 students. Now, my question is, at least to start, what percentage of your goal to provide these solar-powered computers have you achieved so far?
Yeah, I can tell you about the project in a general sense. Simply because it's quite a fluid situation, so I won't speak to absolute numbers, but I will definitely give people the benefit of the general gist as to what's going on. So we do a project with another company in Madagascar called Girogasi, and what they focused on was providing electricity basically to schools. Now, why would you want to provide electricity to schools? Well, some of the schools in Madagascar don't have access to a conventional energy grid because they're in remote areas. The power line poles just don't go that far, but the students are there and they have a desire to learn. And people, computer skills are important. So they reached out to us to provide the technology to work with the solar panels to provide basically electricity using batteries and solar, as opposed to the conventional power lines bringing energy through the poles. And the value of that's linked to your point when it comes to identifying your currency is more valuable sometimes to look at what you do have access to than what you don't. If you kind of harp on what you don't have access to, you really don't see the opportunities. Madagascar has an abundance of sunshine. Like, you may not have the poles going all the way up in the mountains, but the mountains getting sun. So let's see what else we can get electricity from. Solar panels. Okay, well, I guess we might need batteries. Oh, that company supplies batteries. Let's reach out to them and see if they'd be interested. Aceleron, we're really interested to provide batteries to schools. That sounds like a great idea. So, it does make sense when you really look at identifying your currency and where your strengths lie, what your opportunities you have.
I think that and this is fortunately for one group and unfortunately for another group. I think after the show, what is going to be interesting is educators are going to be selling this so well and so hard to students, so much to students, that then utility companies may get upset with educators. I can potentially see that happening. And I'm here thinking, oh gosh, we kind of have to walk a fine line here, or at least I should say maybe the educators don't have to walk that fine line. Instead, it's more of the policymakers that have to walk that fine line between the trade-offs in supporting young entrepreneurs in business as it relates to renewable energy and the mainstay, I should say, or already existing utility companies. Carlton, how long has that project between Aceleron and the other company been going on? Or I should say, when did it start?
So we've been doing projects with companies in these parts of the world since 2018. We've done some work in Kenya. Recently, we started some work with Girogasi in Madagascar. Still looking forward to going to Madagascar. COVID has kind of prevented a lot of travel. I would say, though, that often there's a perception that there is a toss-up or a battle between renewables and the conventional energy distribution network. In practice today, though, there's a symbiotic relationship more so than it is a switch. Like, you don't have to be one or the other. Most places have demonstrated that both of them exist in harmony. And an example of that is that renewables help to lower the cost for the distribution of energy. And the energy network is very good at distributing energy at a low cost. So there's a lot of examples where homeowners with solar leverage that energy to provide cheaper energy for other people. So we kind of have a slight model like that in Barbados right now, where the utility company will buy your solar energy, excess energy from you at a cost. So that's valuable for you. It's also valuable for them because that energy they don't need to produce from a generator. You add a battery into that, and now that's energy that they can buy from you at different times of the day. They can also charge you different rates for their energy because you can now access energy from your battery at different times. It's a very different relationship. It's more symbiotic, but now both parties have something of value. So it's not really a case where, we don't need them or they don't need us. Both people have something that's valuable to each person, and many markets, Australia is one great example, demonstrate that there is a healthy symbiotic relationship that can exist with a utility provider and independent renewable energy generators.
Great. That is wonderful, and I say it that way as well. Like any other business, if you see an emerging trend rather than left behind or doing nothing, you can adjust your business model to follow the trend and also benefit from it as well. And I think that example is a great one. So, Carlton, what's next for you and Aceleron? What is next for you in the future? What are your plans? And if you have any, would you care to share with us?
So at Aceleron, we got a lot of work to do in building out things. I think we've reached the stage where we've kind of started to demonstrate our view, our vision for what the future of batteries looks like, and people are starting to catch on to it. We now got to double down and start to present some manifestations, also known as products, of what that looks like in some other markets. So right now we make batteries for like home solar and stuff like that. We're looking to make some batteries on a commercial scale, businesses. We're even interested for some batteries for our mobility applications. I use the word mobility because mobility takes many forms, and I can't really suggest the form that we would take at this stage. That's still in discussion, but we'd be interested in demonstrating what we think the future of batteries looks like in the mobility sense as well.
This is all great and interesting stuff, Carlton, and we really appreciate that you share that with us. We're going to take a quick break here and return with your Q&A segment. So get your fingers ready. Mr. Cummins and Jelani, I will be happy to take your questions. Feel free to share that in the live chat section. So we'll take a quick break here and return with Mr. Carlton Cummins. Welcome back. We're on the EdTech Spot Season 2, Episode 3, and we're talking about renewable energy, our journey to clean, affordable energy. And we're in our Q&A segment, so get your fingers ready. You can type your questions in the chat, the live chats, that is, and we'll be happy to respond to them. Now, while we wait on that, Carlton, I just want to ask you another question here, and I know this has been one of your focal points in the past as well. Elected officials often like to see project implementation or a success within election cycles because it is when they hold the most power or influence. Given that there's no telling that the next administration will continue even the said policies, what should be our approach when attempting to transform small island developing states like ours in the Caribbean into an eco-sustainable economy?
Well, it's a good point. A lot of the challenge and the frustration that policymakers do have is that the time frame tends to be a little bit artificial in the sense that you need the public support to be able to continue. But unfortunately, a lot of things, and this is where it becomes important, a lot of things take time, and we need to, as a society, because we like to blame the policymakers, but we as a society need to start to appreciate that things take time. It's taken a lifetime to build certain bridges that we'd like to point at and appreciate. There are many things that exist around us that literally have taken a whole person's life to get done. And the more we start to appreciate that things take time, the more we start to support things based on what people are trying to achieve, as opposed to on a partisan basis. I am not going to go into politics, but I do think it's important for not just policymakers, but for society to understand that as well. Like you need to be an active participant. You need to understand what people are trying to do and understand like why they're trying to do that, and whether that is beneficial for not just you, but whether that's beneficial for your children. Like you can't make all of your decisions just simply based on whether it's good for you. You exist as part of a timeline. As weird as that sounds, you exist as part of a timeline. Do you want that within your timeline value is added, or you have just taken away? And when you start to think about that, you will start to make very different decisions when it comes to how you vote, what you vote for, what you're interested in. But you have to reach that level of sentience, I guess. You have to be aware that you exist as a part of many things that have happened. And I'm sorry to say, but you have to think like that, especially when you come from a Caribbean island. We exist as part of a timeline that comes from a very different place. So we need to start thinking about where we want to take it going forward, not just where we are today.
Yes, and I do value that point. We need to take this as a whole of government, whether there's whichever parties, opposing parties, and even the people. One of our former prime ministers addressed or usually called us as a society rather than just an economy, because we're really a society, a family, and it would take all efforts in order to transition into futuristic ideas like the blue economy or renewable energy sustainability within these regions. So I see we have a question here. It's from Girls and Power Tools. I like that. My question is for Carlton. Aceleron batteries are made to work with controlled temperatures. Can the batteries maintain its protected shelf life being out at sea for a long time? This is a good question.
Very specific question. Happy to answer it. So our batteries, like a lot of other batteries on the market, they are designed to operate in certain temperatures. We can also optimize the way the battery is built to handle certain environments, because that's often how you're able to design a battery that works better at sea rather than, let's say, in the basement of someone's house. The environment there is very different, so you just need to make sure that the way you package that battery can handle the environment. So we can design a battery that would be able to maintain its projected shelf life at sea or at land. Is just a case of redesigning it based on some of the external parameters. That sounds like a lot of jargon. Basically, if you were to build the battery for the sea, we would build it to handle a lot of the saline content a lot better, and it would also be able to handle higher humidity as well.
Great. I'm seeing here we have another question from Mr. Nicholas Curtin. He said, it is expected that the price of lithium-ion batteries will fall over the next few years. So that's for Mr. Carlton again.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about that. So lithium-ion batteries currently have a trajectory of 8% improvement every year. Now, that 8% is kind of like a conjunction of a whole series of improvements from performance to cost. So it's not always that the price falls at 8%, but the product generally improves cost and performance around 8%. Generally, the price has been falling quite aggressively. If I give you an example, the Nissan Leaf electric car, when that battery was first made, it was at $1,000 per unit. The unit's kilowatt hours. Today, Tesla's making batteries for their cars at $110 per kilowatt hour. That's over a 11-year span. So dropping cost of batteries is good for the industry in general, and it's good for us, because if we can get access to cheaper batteries, we can make products that are more affordable. What we try to do is to make sure that these products don't end up in landfill as well because they're cheap.
Yeah.
So we try to make them designed that you can upgrade and recycle them, etc., a lot better.
Great. This next question is from Mr. Brian Branch. He said, why did Aceleron, he's asking, why did Aceleron choose to do these type of projects in Kenya and Madagascar?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess it's worth noting that we also do projects in the Caribbean. So we have projects and product that we sell in the Caribbean currently. So it is the case that we actually do some stuff in other markets. These two opportunities in Kenya and Madagascar, those were actually opportunities that were presented to us, and we thought that we could provide something that was valuable. Kenya, Madagascar, the Caribbean, there were some synergies in terms of what these markets tend to need that really align with what we were trying to provide. These are markets where it is often difficult to get replacement components. They're often operating in areas that have remote situations. Also, they have abundance of sunshine. So the Caribbean also has abundance of sunshine. The Caribbean also has that challenge of it being difficult to get replacement components. So our ethos of being able to manage and maintain products by working with local partners really aligned with what they wanted, very much as it aligns with some of our partners in the Caribbean.
Yes. And I'm just encouraging all of our viewers, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Carlton is willing to respond. And if you want to provide or give feedback on this experience, you can do so as well. There's a feedback link in the comment section that you can provide your feedback, or if you're interested in joining this experience, we'll be happy to discuss this further with you. Questions are rolling. Questions are rolling. So I don't see any more questions at this point. I think persons are probably thinking, getting their thoughts together. So in the meantime, what we can do, we can have a little game with Carlton. I'm calling it rapid fire. So what I intend to do is to ask you, or just give you some words or phrases that I would like you to respond to, and you'll give me your vision or what you like to see, how this item transform by, let's say, the year 2050. So I'm giving you 30 seconds on the clock. And the first question is, what's your vision for the Barbados Transport Board? Barbados Transport Board, which is public transportation in Barbados, and go.
I think the most obvious one is electric buses. The price isn't right now, but I think thinking ahead, a lot of it makes sense. I think there was a report that was released recently. The buses break down less. The buses have air conditioning. The buses drive smoother. Why would you not want that? I mean, it sounds pretty good to me.
So you think we're heading in a direction where we should be? Great. Number 2, public roads. Any vision for that? Interesting.
I think one of the challenges with public roads, there's the obvious one, which is that the road's full of potholes. I think this is, for people who don't know this is like a universal challenge in the world. No, it doesn't matter where you go. There are always potholes in the road. I've been to San Francisco. There are potholes in the road. In the UK, there are potholes in the road. They're just some roads they maintain more than others, but potholes is just like a universal challenge. One thing I would say about that, though, is that I think mass transportation needs to play a bigger role. One of the challenges with potholes in the road is actually just like more wear on the road. And that's simply because you got a lot more like vehicles on the road. Oftentimes, though, you could do with a lot less vehicles on the road if you could have a more dynamic transportation system that can group people a lot better and transport more people that are going in the similar direction. A lot of countries are trying different things when it comes to that. I mean, we even do it in the Caribbean. Like when we got parties, it's like you go to a specific area, everybody gets on the bus, and then you go to the event. Like we've dabbled with these kind of models before, but it'll be really exciting to see it kind of double down on for the benefit not just of the potholes in the road, but just like improving transportation in general.
Yes. Well, just to note, there are potholes everywhere, but some more frequent, or they occur more often than others.
That's a material science issue. I didn't really want to point fingers at anybody for why some places have potholes more often than others, but it definitely is an opportunity for any aspiring materials science engineers out there, like if you could find a nice, cost-effective, easy to deploy material, I think there are a lot of interested people who will be very excited to use it.
Yeah. We're open to 30 seconds, but I'll ask you this one last one. I think you love this one. What is your vision for Chefette by the year 2050? And if you don't know, Chefette is a local restaurant in Barbados.
I mean, I will say one thing about Chefette is that Chefette has demonstrated a really good example of how to really operate a professional business in the Caribbean. Chefette punches beyond its above its weight. Like people don't. If you're in Barbados, you don't realize it, but Chefette punches above its weight. But Chefette is very good at what they do. I think one thing I think Chefette could do would be to somehow find a way to transfer that into some other industries in the Caribbean, even if it's not from like an education perspective, but some other businesses, because they're very, very good at what they do. We take it for granted, but like Chefette is on it.
I guess that can be translated as you like to order roti in England as well, right?
I mean, I won't complain about it.
Yeah. Chefette is great, and I'm quite sure if they wanted to, they can transition into other markets easily. We have another question here from Darren Suku. He says he's 14 years old and he's been doing research for quite a while now on mechanical and renewable energy engineering. What's a great quality to have for entering this field?
So, when it comes to renewable energy in general, research is a really big area there, because there's so many ways to do things. And whenever we think we've figured out all of it out, something new comes up, some new material, some new opportunity crops up, and it just changes the game completely. A good example, when I was setting up solar panels in 2013, the energy efficiency of a solar panel was 15%. Like you were doing well if you were getting 15%. Today is 22%, and people talking about 25% in the next few years. That's come about due to a lot of different things in materials and just like different changes in the world. So I think having an aptitude when it comes to research, being very aware of market trends and changes, very aware of things that are happening not just in renewable energy, but in material science, in finance and business. Like, it's so interconnected that the better you can be aware of all of the things going on in the world, I think it makes you a more skillful or a more cognizant person in the renewable energy field. The risk I think people usually have is when they think that I'm in renewable energy, I'm just going to focus on that. I'm not interested in any of the news that's going on in any other market. The more aware you are of your environment, the more tactful and skillful you tend to be in renewable energy.
Good points.
Yeah, absolutely great points. Carlton, thank you so much for answering the young lad's question. And I've spent just under half a decade working in that same space. And what I would also say to Darren is, outside of doing your research, outside of following the trends, again, which is still research, talk to persons who actually work in the space. See if that space is for you. Sometimes you can do all your reading, do all your research, and then you might realize the space is not for you. And that's not a bad thing. It just means you've tried a lot of things, right? It just means you've tried a lot of things. But actually testing the space, and you can test the space based on other people's experience. You can test it using my experience, test it using Carlton's experience. So we listen to this show over and over again, right? Listen to what he said. He mentioned a few things in there. He didn't just mention renewable energy. He mentioned material science. Yeah. I mean, you even have meteorology in there. He might not have mentioned it, but I can, right? We're talking about quite a bit within that space of renewable energy. It might not be making the solar panel more efficient. It might not necessarily be an internship at Carlton's company. Hint, hint, Darren, don't be shy to ask. It might be something else. Carlton, be nice to Darren. All right, so moving on to the next question here. We have another question from Mr. Nicholas Curtin. And the question is, currently, there's no financial incentive for having a grid-connected PV solar system with batteries in Barbados. Do you think the framework of the renewable energy sector is lacking? Carlton?
That's a really good question. It definitely links to policy. I would
Voting.
agree that the incentives are not nearly as much as they should be for what we call solar plus storage. We do have a pretty good incentive mechanism for just solar when it comes to a grid tied model, but there's no mechanism that currently leverages the battery. I will give you a sneak peek to let you know that behind the curtain, policymakers are aware of this, and it is something that is in discussion at this point in time. So you can expect that this is going to change very soon. Just because something is the way it is now doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be that way. A lot of people who have been investing in energy storage, one, they've been expecting and anticipating that this change is going to happen. Two, they wanted to have that freedom and flexibility for themselves. So what we've done for them is that we actually designed the battery systems that we have installed with solar in Barbados to work on what's called a self-consumption model. So the idea is that the solar is produced on the roof, it goes into the battery, and then that battery allows you to use that solar during the day and at night. And because you can use that solar energy at night, it allows you to not have to buy the energy from the utility during the day. But we would like to see a future where you can sell some of that energy at night to the utility provider from the battery. That's a trend that you're seeing in a lot of other countries, because that means that energy at night, they don't have to produce from a generator. And it's really important to note that homeowners and the utility want the same thing. They want like energy. The utility wants to provide access to energy, and any way they can do that more cheaply than they're doing it today, they are interested in that. So, transitioning and getting batteries involved actually helps their agenda more than it hinders it. As a result, there are lots of discussions going on about how they can leverage batteries to push through their agenda. Nobody in any room currently is saying, guys, let's continue to buy fossil fuel and run these generators. Like, they're just as frustrated about having to manage these generator assets as everybody else. They're just as frustrated about having to do this dance and negotiation with foreign powers for the cost of energy that just suddenly changes at a whim every time somebody else has a disagreement. So they are just as interested about having that ability to use renewable energy, which is not partisan. So it's just a case of the policy catching up with that particular dynamic. But it is a good point that the policy is a little bit lagging when it comes to batteries. It will get there.
Again, walking the fine line here, having worked in that space for a bit, one of the things that I noticed, and it was also pointed out to me on numerous occasions, Carlton actually kind of hinted to it just now, and he also spoke to it earlier in a question that I would have asked him in the first segment. If you think about it, now that everyone's home, this is one of the only times that people in history that people are really home during the day. Pause, think about that for a second. Mostly people are not at home during the day, and that's when the sun is producing the energy, right? Funny enough, but then we go home at night, and that's when we turn on everything. So during the day, nothing. But then when we go home, everything, right? And that's when you have to draw energy from the utility. Okay, so I think that's kind of speaks to what Mr. Nicholas Curtin is also asking as well. Are policymakers really thinking about these things, especially now going forward, given the fact that right now we're probably going to continue remote work for a significant period of time, during the pandemic or not? If people don't have to come into work but are still significantly productive, or even more so, and companies are making more money, maybe gone are the days when people need to see you and see that you're working. Instead, maybe they'll accept, well, you know what? Hey, the money's still rolling in, the company's still doing well, productivity is going up. I don't need to see what they're doing in order to know that they're working. Let me just give them their due at the end of the month, right? Maybe something for policymakers and companies to think about. Okay, Darren had another question. I actually answered it in the chat, but so what I'll do is I'll actually direct it straight to you, Carlton. Darren, again from Trinidad, asked, in your opinion, Carlton, is having a bachelor's of science in electrical engineering or mechanical engineering better? Which one is better for going into the field of renewable energy regards to engineering?
Um, the more you get into these things, you realize that the concept of better and worse is just a concept. Like there are very few things that are like absolutely better or absolutely worse. It's often it depends. I would say that it depends first starts with you as an individual. Which discipline do you feel more comfortable with? Some people feel more predisposed or comfortable with electrical engineering. Others feel more comfortable with mechanical. For me, for example, I like mechanical engineering a lot more because it was a lot more tangible and tactile. You're working with parts, things that you could see, feel, touch. I could use my senses a lot more. Electrical engineering often is a lot more diagnostic. You use other devices to translate something into something your senses can then interpret. You use sensors, you use oscilloscopes, you use the meters to read stuff. If you like stuff like that, then electrical engineering is better for you. As opposed to if you like using your senses a lot more, mechanical engineering is one of those areas that may benefit you more. In terms of what the industry tends to value, it also depends on what company you want to go to. But in general, most companies tend to look at you as an individual and your your willingness to learn, especially at a very early stage, as opposed to what your degree states. Because I can tell you as an employer, your degree generally often is just a demonstration of your ability to learn. So it's basically just like the very very first step out the door. It doesn't matter as much as you think it does, but it is important in that it shows that you have the ability to learn. You have the ability to start with something and follow through with it, and you have that demonstration of how well you were able to do that in this case, which is your degree. But it doesn't limit you in a lot of companies. Like nobody's gonna say, "Oh, he's not electrical. I'm not really gonna like be interested in him for that," unless the specific role requires it in absolute terms. But renewable energy is such a broad field that it's not like it's an absolute. You have to do this or you have to do that.
Darren, it's what Carlton has said is really true. I can back it up. Carlton and I went to school together. We both studied mechanical engineering at UW St. Augustine. And we are both are in very different fields. The field that he's in could be considered to be electrical or electronic, right? It could be considered to be mechanical. He also mentioned material science. Right now, I am deeply into robotics and coding. And what you find interesting is I just listened to a lecture where a bioengineer, or rather, I should say, a biological engineer, was given a lecture on how he developed these insect robots. We're talking small, small, tiny micro robots. Yeah, robots. That's supposed to be my field, right? But remember what I said earlier, and remember what I asked, what I spoke about it in the first segment, where I emphasized we're not just all stuck on one career path. And as Carlton said, really and truly, that first degree, that's really focused on your ability and your capacity to learn. After that, it's whatever you want to do. And if there's anything you get tired of midway, doesn't matter what's going on, change it. Nothing wrong with that. Like, for example, Jonathan and I are big fans of Carlton, and we're excited to see what Carlton does after Aceleron. Whenever that is, we don't know, right? I'm sure Carlton is also excited to see what's next. It might not be anything energy-based. It might be something else. We have no idea. Carlton might get tired and say, okay, I hate this energy thing. I hope not. But he might. He just might. Okay. Nicholas Curtin is bringing one last question here. Nicholas Curtin is saying, I think at present, the FTC. Jonathan, can you help me with the FTC? I'm trying to remember. No, that's not the fuel clause adjustment. I'm trying to remember.
I think that's the Fair Trading Commission.
Correct. Right. So I think at present, the Fair Trading Commission, Mr. Curtin says, the rates for PV systems over 1 megawatt are not attractive. And then considering you should have storage for such large systems for grid stabilization. The current price of, and then he goes on to say, the current price of batteries makes the project not feasible because of the capital cost. Carlton, I am not even going to touch that one. You're the expert here, sir.
Yeah, no, there's some salient points. So at large scale, energy storage can be very expensive. And it also depends on what you want to use the energy storage for. So frequency stabilization is one of the aspects. Sometimes you use it to cover your base load. There's just a lot of mechanisms and different reasons you may want to use a battery at a large scale. I would agree that capital investment for large batteries can be prohibitive, especially in the Caribbean market. There's another thing to consider with large batteries, which is land space. They do tend to take up a lot of space, and they do tend to need a lot of infrastructure to integrate into the space, which is why I personally would advocate for a decentralized model when it comes to energy storage. Just as you have a water tank at your house for every home to provide that buffer when it comes to water, I believe that people should have an energy storage system as a buffer for every home, as opposed to like one big battery up in St. Lucie. You know, you can't put one big battery in every parish. That's infeasible and very expensive. Linked to that though, when it comes to making energy storage more cost effective, one of the ways Aceleron has been doing work in this in the African market, and we're very excited about doing some stuff with this in the Caribbean market, because we make a battery that's serviceable, we make an energy storage product that is better placed in a service model. So we are having discussions in Africa, instead of the companies buying the battery flat out as one-off product, we actually have the battery commercialized as a service, almost like a subscription model. By doing that, we've actually removed the capital investment for the product. This is very specific jargon, but I'm very sure Nicholas gets where I'm going with this. So we've actually been able to transform energy storage, which is often very expensive, from a high capital investment venture into a service or subscription model, where they basically pay for the batteries not as one big lump sum, but as a service fee based on what they actually need. And we are able to do that as Aceleron because we make a product that can be serviced, it can be maintained, and is better placed in a service model. Basically, is the difference between buying a brand new car flat out and buying a car in a lease model. No, you wouldn't lease a car as a company if you couldn't maintain it, because it then becomes really expensive for you as the lessor to do that. And that's often what stops a lot of companies from putting batteries in service models. Like, how am I going to gain any value out of that asset or keep that asset in a lease model if I need to throw it away every 10 years? Well, if you have an asset that can be serviced, no, you don't need to throw it away every 10 years. You can actually maintain it every 10 years and extend its lifespan at a cost which is far cheaper than integrating a replacement. Very specific, a lot of jargon in there, but I'm pretty sure that Nicholas knows where I'm going with this.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you have seen how Carlton would have earned those awards that we spoke about in the first segment. He didn't buy them. He earned those. So you can really see that coming out.
Yeah, I'd really like to thank Carlton for taking time to be a part of our show today. If you want to reach out to him, feel free to do that on social media. Or you can also reach out to Aceleron. I'm quite sure he'll be happy to respond to you, or Aceleron will be able to provide you further insight if you have any other questions. So we've come to the end of this episode, and would encourage you to look out for our next episode. If you want to join this experience, as we said before, you can fill out that feedback form in the description box. We'll be happy to discuss this further with you. So, Season 2, Episode 4 will be on the tools, tips, and resources that educators can use in the classroom to encourage that inquiry-based learning and ownership, and inspire practical solutions to climate and renewable energy related problems within our environment. So this is definitely something to look forward to, huh?
It is, Jonathan. Jonathan, I think you're going to kill me. I think you're going to kill me.
Oh, we have a question.
One last question.
Yeah, I saw you pop up there.
Go ahead. This is all yours. Since I interrupted you, please go ahead.
Yeah, he's so eager. I know. Yeah, he's so eager. I'm just gonna let him go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so last question, Carlton, again, is Aceleron going to pursue any other forms of renewable energy storage? That's an interesting last question.
It is a good question. So fun fact, we actually do other forms of energy storage. If I get really into the jargon, we currently work with 3 forms of lithium-ion technology at Aceleron. So we work with lithium manganese cobalt oxide, we work with lithium iron phosphate, and we also work with lithium cobalt aluminate. I think that's the term for it. So those are the 3 chemistries we work with. We also work in some other markets. So we actually make lithium batteries for a company that makes electric quad bikes in the UK. We'll be looking to do some electric mobility e-tuk-tuks. It's either in India or Kenya. I need to double check. I should know this, but I don't remember. So we're going to be doing some electric tuk-tuks in one of those markets very soon as well. We're really interested in applying batteries in a lot of other fields because we see the value of being able to provide clean energy. It's not that the battery produces the energy, but the battery allows you to store that energy that you can then use in other applications. I think the way I like to phrase it is that this is one of the first times in history that we are actually having a lot of flexibility in how we choose to power our lives. Like this wasn't a discussion that was had, even 15 years ago about, electric buses and electric cars. The technology just wasn't there. But now that battery technology has gotten a lot better, Aceleron and many other companies are really excited about what else could we power using batteries, because we now have batteries at that cost where it is now a conversation. Not always as cheap as the incumbent, but is now at a point where the conversation needs to be had because people can see where the direction is going, that the incumbent is only trending more expensive. We only focus currently though on lithium. We are interested in many other variants of lithium. You will hear talk about solid state batteries probably the next 2 to 3 years. So we got a lot of stuff that we are interested in. We got a lot of opportunities that we're pursuing. And there's a lot of work to be done in the world when it comes to clean energy.
Thank you so much, Carlton. Jonathan, more or less, has already closed out, but I'd like to thank you for being on the show. We deeply appreciate it. And as Jonathan would have also shared, we'd like to ask our viewers to look forward and stay tuned for STEM in Education Season 2, Episode 4, where we'll focus on the tools, tips, and resources that educators can use in the classroom to encourage inquiry-based learning and ownership and inspire practical solutions to climate and renewable energy related problems within their environment. So that is something to look forward to. And as always, we invite you to subscribe to our channel here. Subscribe. That's what Jonathan always says. To the EdTech Spot channel. We are on Instagram, aka IG. We are on Facebook. We are also on Twitter. And we are also on YouTube, where you can find this recording. So you can look at all these channels to stay up to date with all the happenings on the EdTech Spot. Thank you for watching. Subscribe. And until next time, be safe. And what do we say, Jonathan? Stay STEMmy.
Stay STEMmy.